first question is highlighted. The first question to the panel then. Which is the best house in Hogwarts to belong to if you wish to be a professional psychologist?
Becky?
So, microphone. I actually had a chat with my fellow occupational psychologists about this one. And we felt that we wouldn't be in a house, we would be the sorting hat. Who would be setting the criteria to select people for the correct house. Yeah?
It's complete cop-out.
Or Ravenclaw.
Any further comments, or shall we move on to some weighty academic questions?
I wish I had a witty answer, but I don't really.
We were actually debating about how the various houses mapped onto the big five personality characteristics, which is quite interesting. I'll leave you to have a think about that after today's talk. So, if we move on to some of the questions from the delegates. How do I decide between counselling and clinical psychology given the significant overlap?
Flipping heck. Should we wrestle? Should we fight for them? Or should we fight for it? No.
I'll go first. It's really difficult, I think. We've been talking about it, haven't we, Fraser? About answering this question. If I'm totally honest, I couldn't afford financially to do the counselling psychology training. So for me, so for me, clinical was the only option out of the two. One of my best friends did the counselling psychology route, loved it, absolutely loved it, but it was really difficult financially for her. And she had to pay for her own, is this right? Your own supervision, you had to pay for your own therapy. Oh, it's tough, and you don't get paid. Well, you did, so that was really clever.
Yeah,
she didn't.
like that.
Yeah. So for me, it was more about the finances. But I think also for me, I liked the model of being able to learn about working with systems, not just the individual client. I quite liked working with people around the person as well as the person. I quite like working with teams, how to get teams to think differently about a person in a hospital, for example. So I liked the sort of multifactorial dimensions to it all. That was me, but...
There's no doubt that the financial aspect to clinical and counselling is can be a key factor for people applying to either. What I would say is that for me, it was the therapeutic nature of working like you were saying about working with the bigger picture. I kind of sometimes felt a little bit opposite in counselling psychology. I quite liked working in that subjective environment, that one-to-one therapeutic field. I really like doing that, getting to know somebody on a longer term basis, working with an individual through any kind of challenges, mental health or whatever. I also like the fact in counselling that, we're trained in multiple different therapeutic approaches, person-centered therapy, CBT, I know clinical as well have elements of this, but, EMDR, emotion-focused therapy, ACT, all these kind of things counselling psychologists are trained in. So that was one of the things that kind of excited to me. But it is true that there are financial aspects to it that you have to consider. There's no getting around that, really.
There's a lot of crossover, isn't there? I think
there is quite a lot of crossover, yeah. It can, and you'll find that as well when you're applying for jobs in the NHS that will say clinical counselling psychologist, which I have a bit of a bugbear over. But, it speaks to some of the crossover. It does, yeah. There's absolutely some overlap.
Just to add as well, when I've been in different places, I've advertised jobs. We quite often advertise for a clinical or a counselling psychologist, recognising that the skills that you bring are equally valuable. It will just be slightly different, but equally valuable. So,
yeah.
Thank you. Just to follow on from that question, the next one down. I want to be a therapist, but I've been told focusing on counselling psychology is limited in the range of work I can do. Is clinical psychology a better degree?
Flipping out, man. We're back to the Hogwarts question. I think there's plenty of opportunities to work as a counselling psychologist. I know you were saying, Jemima, about working privately in clinical psychology. Sometimes it's a little bit of a different scope. That can, I feel anyway personally, some might disagree, that's a bigger opportunity in counselling psychology to an extent. I know plenty of clinical psychs who work privately. But I think private work is something I'm quite interested in. the multidiscipline or the multi-aspect work, different branches of work, I think is a good opportunity in counselling too. I wouldn't say, I don't agree that necessarily that clinical psychology is what's called like a better degree. I don't think that's the case. I think it depends on the subjectivity of you. I wouldn't say that there are more limited opportunities in counselling psychology than there are in clinical. I just think it's about what kind of work you want to do and what kind of environment you want to work in. And if private work is something you're interested in, then perhaps counselling might be something you want to consider a lot more. I don't know, that depends. Maybe you think differently. Maybe not.
No, do you know, I think you could be right. I know I'm probably not a totally typical clinical psychologist in that I've gone off and done my own thing after a few years of qualifying. So yeah, and I mean, when I qualified, I worked in a hospice where actually you're sometimes working with families or somebody who's got a life-limiting illness for at least a year before in individual therapy before you discharge them, or they're too ill to see you anymore. So it kind of there is a lot of crossover. It depends on what job you end up going into as well. So it's a bit of a woolly answer, but it depends. Is probably the answer. But no, equally valuable qualification, 100%, I would say.
Thank you. So next question has been hovering for a while. Just got my MSc and come from a working class background, so the advice to take time and do unpaid work is infeasible. Any possible advice for finding paid experience? I'll open up.
I'm going to grab the mic on this one. I think when you're thinking about paid experience, I think some of the principles I talked about in my talk are applicable here. And what actually you were saying was about that 70% of the jobs are not advertised. You really do have to reach out and connect with different organisations to create the opportunities that you don't think exist. Yes, if you not sit about because you're studying, but if you wait for an opportunity to come about for you that, hopefully I'll make some money as I train, the likelihood is it's really not going to happen. You have to go out and create those opportunities yourself. You have to network, you have to engage. It might require some voluntary work to an extent. At times I've done plenty of voluntary roles that have led to paid work, and that has happened as I've trained and been applicable to my studies. So I would say definitely reaching out and trying to network as much as possible is valuable for that.
And I mean, I don't know what the qualification was in, but I would say any job gives you transferable skills. So doing anything is better than doing nothing. And trying to then maybe play the long game a little bit more and think about how the next step can help you on the journey rather than the next step being the final point or the final destination. Think about what skills you'd like to get, how you're going to get them, and getting a job that pays might not be the job you want to do forever, but it might be the stopgap that gets you the money that you need and also some skills and experience.
And I just want to say, I completely identify with that question. I couldn't have afforded to be an honorary assistant psychologist. I saw loads of those posts advertised. I feel quite strongly about that, actually, that it feels quite discriminatory against people who can't afford to go and work full-time for nothing. I worked, as I said, I worked as a cleaner, so that was how I got my money. And then I also did a bit of voluntary work for the Samaritans. So I tried to just get some, pepper in some good clinical experience whilst also earning some money to live on as well. It's not easy. I can't say it's easy, but where there's a will, there's usually a way.
And just anecdotally, I actually heard a great story from someone who applied for the clinical program without any clinical experience and got on it because they'd done bar work, and they talked about the crossover between working with individuals who were very drunk and how they'd use the skills in the context that could work for a clinical program. So it's about crafting, it's about storytelling, and thinking about your story and how you're going to create that to make the recruiter's job really easy for them.
I'm going to jump in from the side and say I really agree with that. That's really important. I've actually done it the other way around. So I ran my own pub and use my psychology qualifications and experience to talk about how that would equip me for that. So it does work. There's a lot of crossover. I was going to say though that I come from a working class background. I did my degree and my PhD as a single parent. Getting voluntary experience was not an option for me. But what you can do is look for jobs that lead you in the right direction. So thinking about, if you want to be a clinical psychologist, then working with clinical populations can be really important. So trying to get a job that brings you into contact with a clinical population, you might not be a psychologist. You might be a healthcare assistant, but you're working with that population, you get the skills and you can talk about how your experience will help you moving forward. If you want to be an educational psychologist, a classroom assistant, a teaching assistant, it's paid work, but you're working with the right group of people that you can take that experience with you. Always thinking about those skills that you've got. The BPS just did a longitudinal piece of research. It was a 7-year study where they looked at psychology career destinations. And what they found is that the majority of psychology graduates, their first job isn't the job that they want. Within 5 to 7 years, nearly everybody is in a job that they really love and that they feel is using their psychology qualifications. So psychology is kind of a slow burn subject. You don't always go straight from your degree into the end destination, I think as somebody described over there. You go from your degree into the next stepping stone and into the next stepping stone and into the next stepping stone, and then you maybe find the thing that you love. Yeah, so it's a bit like dating before you get married.
Excellent analogy. Okay, so a question has been highlighted and hovering for how does one go about attaining an occupational psychology QOP stage 2 supervisor?
I think you should answer this.
So for this, you can consult what's called RAPS, and it's the Register for Something with the BPS. And actually, most supervisors who are trained will be on RAPS, and you can find out who they are if you just Google it. And Google the subject area that you want, you'll be able to find individuals who are willing to be supervisors. If you're really struggling, I would suggest contacting the qualifications team, because often they are really in touch with the supervisors, know who the good supervisors are, and know who will be willing to take on trainees. So definitely use the BPS and use their RAPS register.
Okay, next question. So, having graduated in BSc Psychology and MRes in Psychology with limited vocational experience, what is the best way to get an assistant psychologist position?
Do you want to go for that one?
I've never actually been an assistant psychologist, so I'm not the best one to answer this. But I'll have a go. Apply. I think apply. Do a good application. Get your name out there. I think there are. I do see quite a lot of assistant psychology posts advertised. I don't know what it's like in this area. Certainly down south where I live, we do get quite a lot of posts. I just think you've just got to apply. It's a numbers game really. Apply to as many jobs as you can. Put it right in. It's similar in your application as you would to a clinical application. Is have a narrative that makes sense in your application as to why you're passionate about this role, what you can bring to the role, any work experience, as has already been said, anything you've had, why, what you've learned from that is so much more important than what you actually did. So I would say that's my advice.
I would add to that, absolutely the case. I worked as an assistant psychologist for a year, and I would say when thinking about getting that position, what got me the role was not the fact that I knew more, I wasn't in any way qualified. There were some PhD graduates who actually went for the same job as I did, but it was a case where if you're able to express that you're able to work in a multidisciplinary team environment effectively, if you can demonstrate that, if you can get across, I think so much of the time we focus on these kind of jobs as academic jobs, and they are to an extent, yes, you need your qualifications, yes, you need to know what you're talking about, but if you're unable to get a personality across, you're going to struggle. So you need to be like workable. Like you have to be able to be worked with in a good team. I think those things are overlooked. They're really, really important. Plenty of times people who are really, really qualified don't get these positions and they wonder why. And it's because they've not got much of their personality across. You want to be able to be worked with in a multidisciplinary team. I was working in a brain injury unit with nurses, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, psychiatrists, so you need to be able to do that. One other quick thing about that is I worked with somebody who was an assistant psychologist, and she got the position because 6 months before being hired, she had contacted the brain injury unit, and this kind of ties into networking, some of the stuff I'm talking about. She contacted the unit and said, I'm willing to volunteer as an assistant psychologist for a day a week, and they said yes, without anything. So it was a case where she just contacted them, offered voluntary work, they said yes, a post came up 6 months later and she got it. She was the first one in line because she had the experience. So, thinking outside the box a little bit is applicable there too, I think.
Okay, so next question. How important is it to get a first-class degree in first-class undergraduate degree, given how competitive careers in practicing psychology are? So that's following a question on from earlier today. How important is it?
I don't think it's the most important thing. I think what we're talking about here is storytelling, and I think that that's the most important thing. So how you can get your story across to an employer as to why you're the best person for the role is much more than I got a first-class degree in my psychology undergraduate. It's the learning, it's the experiences that you've got outside of that. And actually just having a first-class degree isn't enough. You need to be able to sell much more than that to an employer.
I'm on the selection panel for a couple of different clinical doctorate courses, and obviously if somebody in their application form has got a first-class degree, it's a great thing. It makes you instantly, your application looks good, but we are looking for so much more than that, and many applications that I've read that they've got the first-class degree, but that's it. There's nothing about the person that comes across in their narrative. They're not really talking about what they've learnt. And different universities will score different things, but certainly in one of the universities that I helped with the selection for, a 2-1 and a first, a high 2-1 and a first are equal points. So it's not always that it's the be all and end all, and certainly you might not have a first or a high 2-1, but you've got other stuff which would be equally valuable. So.
Yeah, just to add to that, I was on track for a first in my undergrad and then fell at the last hurdle, which I'm still very bitter about, but that's because of my own ego. It's never come up for me. Like I don't really heard of anybody who's been asked if they've got a first in an interview or been asked in an application form. It's not really. I think it's just like a thing that we like to attribute to ourselves. Sometimes it's not like. I think yes, okay, it might look up. Yeah, okay, obviously it looks good on applications, but it's not something that's come up for me applying for jobs and things like that. So I wouldn't stress too much about it.
Okay, thank you. So one good question specifically for Fraser, and then we'll get back to some of the highlight ones. So can people work for you for what's that?
For free, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends on what you do. It depends on what you do, yeah. I mean, if it's, video editing or collaboration, like featuring things, I do some collaboration videos with people in America. So I do have people featured on YouTube channel, something on my videos if people are bringing value, if that's what you mean by work with. If you feel like you'd be able to add some stuff to Get Site, that'd be great. We don't make any money, so I can't give you any of that. But I can give you some exposure or something like, whatever. But you can chat to me about that at some point.
Okay, so VPS summer internships have been mentioned. What kind of things do these internships entail in terms of roles and responsibilities?
Shucks.
Okay,
Yeah, it was me that mentioned these in passing in the earlier panel sessions, so I'll speak to this. Most of them are offered within university settings, so they're often research internships working alongside an academic, usually between the second and third year of your degree. So it's the summer between second and third year. They're proposed by academics for BPS, and the BPS fund them, so they are paid. So you're not relying on voluntary work. Some universities have additional internships. So here at the university where I work, we have a match funding scheme. So for everyone that the BPS fund, we fund one as well, so that we can grow how much available work there is. And it's working as a research assistant to research active academics. So you could be doing whatever they do. You could be doing neuropsych testing, you could be doing entering data, you could be interviewing children for a developmental project, you could be doing absolutely anything. Have a look around your university, see what people are doing for research ideas, and then get in touch with an academic and say, I'd love to do one of these, and get them to apply for it. So you really need to be in a university environment, but if you are, then there's no reason at all that you couldn't do this, either with GPS funding, or potentially, I think the microphone just died, or potentially with an academic that can get some funding from another source.
So will I be penalised for further study by taking a year or so out after my undergrad degree to work out what I want to do for my master's, PhD or career?
So I feel like a broken record, but it's about the story. So if you're taking a year out, what are you taking a year out from? You're not taking a year out from yourself, are you? So think about what are you doing in that year that's going to be relevant. And it's about that, how you sell the story to an employer. Your CV in your application form isn't a diary, it's a kind of edited book. You know, it's the things, the important things that you want to tell an employer about what you've done that makes you the right person for a role, or that you want to tell to a university programme as to why you're the right person for an MSc or a PhD. So it doesn't really matter if you do things in a particular order, but what does matter is how you weave a story around what you do.
Got it.
I think the next one applies to all panel members. So Ross from DMU says, as a psychologist, what was your inspiration for following your career path? And I think it'd be really interesting to hear a comment from each of our panel members.
Do you want to go first? Okay. I think I wish I had gone first. I have a real interest. I love being around people. I'm really interested about people. I never have had an academic background. I'm not what I would call an academic person, which I think sounds sometimes a little contrary to going on a doctorate, but it's really not. I'm dyslexic, so I've always had issues with study and work and things like that. That's always been the kind of narrative for me growing up in school. And psychology was an environment where I could learn about people. And, I've always had perhaps maybe a kind of higher emotional intelligence, certainly applicable to my academic intelligence. So knowing people, believing in the potential of people, something I'm really passionate about, believing that people can go to new stages in their life after some of the most difficult times in their life. That's really what inspires me to do psychology. I don't think there's any other profession in the world where you get to do that more than being a psychologist. So I'd say that's what drives me.
So for me, I chose psychology as a degree subject because I just found it interesting at A-level. I also wanted to fix my phobia with wasps. So I thought that a psychology degree might be a really helpful way to do that. I did business studies at A-level as well, and really found that the two subjects crossed over. And as I said in my talk, my family, parents hated their jobs but did them because they needed money. And I always felt that was a little bit sad to not get a lot of joy out of your work. I really wanted to help people using psychology because I think it has such broad appeal.
I didn't really have a particular one person that inspired me to become a psychologist, but I had lots of people that I met throughout my life that I thought elements of them inspired me, and I suppose it kind of was an amalgamation of all of them. There was I remember when my son was really young, he was 3, he was diagnosed with this, an autistic spectrum disorder, and I met this really lovely lady, randomly, who happened to own a top Harley Street clinic and offered me some really amazing therapy for him, and it really helped him. And he happened to have the one spectrum disorder that is actually something that can be worked through and you can develop through, and he is absolutely okay now. And so she inspired me because she had her own business and she was a speech and language therapist, but I thought, oh yeah, that's someone I'd love to be like. And she was kind. And then there was, when I was a teenager, I had my own psychologist who helped me for a bit. He inspired me. And just various people that I've met through my life, but more as well, like an internal image of the kind of person that I one day would really like to be. And I'd always sort of been told, well, you never amount to anything, or you'll never do anything with your life, you're a real failure. And those words had really haunted me, but I had also had this little tiny internal image of someone that I actually would like to be, and I knew that psychology fitted with my values. So I kind of inspired myself as well by thinking of this person that one day I'd like to be.
Another question from Ross from DNU. Would you recommend doing a variety of short placements or one long placement?
Well, as part of the clinical training, you do a variety, and I really love that. It fitted with me. It's tough because you just feel like, you might have 6 months somewhere, and just by the end of that 6 months, you're just feeling that you're getting the hang of it a bit, and then you move on again. But actually, looking back on it, the wealth of experience I got from several placements over 3 years was really, really good. I loved it, but it was more challenging. But I can imagine, we did have one placement that was a year long in adult mental health, and that was really good because you really did feel that you got your teeth into it a bit more, so to speak. So.
I would say on the counselling psychology route, it's maybe applicable to other branches of psychology as well, that you're finding your own placement providers, you're trying to engage with other organisations. At least in Glasgow anyway, Glasgow Cali Uni, they say, a minimum of 3 placements over the 3 years. Now, some people break that up, some people do more. One of the things I have done is I have an extended placement. So I have a placement where I have worked at now for just over a year when I started my placement, and I have another placement which has staggered. Now, that's just as it's happened, but it has actually been quite a good experience. I've had an understanding of working long-term with some clients, and also worked in a short-term environment as well. So I kind of get a grasp of both. So I think, you could go both ways. You could combine the two if you're doing multiple placements.
A question for Jemima. I'm interested in the work that you do with homeless people. Could this be a full-time job, and how would I approach it?
Yes, it's an emerging area actually. It's quite new, working with people who are homeless. So there's a new model that's been sort of rolled out throughout the country called psychologically informed environments, which is about working, using prisons as well, but working with the environment around a person and how you can make that more psychologically informed. And that can be with individual clients, but also working with hostels, working with a wide variety of sectors, and also working with staff to make them think, help them to think psychologically, help them to formulate what's going on with people. That is definitely, there's limited amount of jobs, but it's becoming a thing, if you like. And it's an exciting thing to be getting involved in actually, because the government is starting to put some money into it, and recognising the value and the evidence base for the work is growing. So.
Okay, so we're getting the last few questions in order to keep the time. So, one that's been there for a while. In what way can undergrads get involved in the BPS?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'll throw it open to some of my colleagues.
Okay. I tried to keep it short. So I'm the BPS trainer for the student committee, which is a committee of 15 students across the UK. And they're organising several events for students where students can get involved as well. So if you're a student member of the BPS, you should get the psychologist every month, but you should also get Psych Talk, which is the student journal of the BPS, which is run by the BPS committee Obviously, one way to get involved is joining the BPS committee, student committee. They're usually vacant positions every summer, or like advertised, I would say, around May, June. Usually, there are different kind of roles. So if you're into editing or communication, you can join the Site Talk editorial team. You can also just be an ordinary member, organising your own events, such as networking events, which we currently run across the country. We just recently had one in St Andrews. There's another one we're going to have in Manchester and London. And we run a couple of seminar series where we actually also involve students across universities. Usually universities have BPS reps. If your university doesn't, it's a good point. You could just ask if you could be one, and then you are the link between BPS and the university. And if we would hold events in your region, then we would contact those BPS reps and ask them to help out for organising those events.
Can I add one more thing to that?
That was a really good answer, and I couldn't have given all that information. But the other thing that you can do is look for BPS regional branches. So depending on where you live, BPS North East, BPS West Midlands, BPS Wessex, you know, each region has its own BPS branch, and quite often they organise social events as well as the kind of more formal academic events. So down in the Midlands we have the Psychologist in the Pub events, and literally it's a psychology speaker, comes along, talks psychology, anybody can come, it's free, you get to know other psychology, people who are interested. Apparently there's one here, in Northumbria. So yeah, you know, look at what your regional branch is doing as well, because that might be a good way to get involved, particularly socially, and that's when your networking comes in, and you can network that way without having to do voluntary work.
Okay, so last couple of questions. So let's go firstly with how do you deal with imposter syndrome? As a postgrad, I feel like someone who qualified for the Olympics but has no idea why I'm pretty sure I'm
I would say, tell us when you find out. I think the thing with imposter syndrome is that in order to help alleviate it, you need to know that everybody feels it. It's not. I think Jemima, you're saying this exact same thing. You were talking about imposter syndrome and how I really like that picture of how everybody's thinking the exact same thing about I shouldn't be here, I don't deserve to be here. I think you deal with it by knowing that it's there and just trying to work around it anyway, knowing that other people feel the exact same way. You're not alone in that thought process, I imagine.
I totally agree. So knowing that you're normal, that it's okay, a thought is not a fact, is absolutely important for you to remember. Just because you think something, it doesn't mean it's true. And just know that it just makes you a human being, and it probably means that you have a very high chance of being a successful human being because you are thinking these things. There's that quote, I don't know, this famous person once said, the problem with the world is, you know, I don't know, all the great people think they're rubbish and all the people that don't know anything think they know it all, you know, it's a bit like that. So just kind of work with yourself and just kind of know that despite how you feel, you absolutely deserve to be where you are, and remind yourself of your successes, I would say.
And just something that has triggered there, what I was actually going to say in my talk was you don't serve the world by making yourself small, so think about how you can make yourself important, because being small isn't going to serve the world.
Sure.
There's a whole literature on imposter syndrome as well, so you can read up on it and educate yourself about it and know your enemy.
Feel more imposter.
I actually think that you're this time a very positive and uplifting kind of note to finish on, so I'd like to suggest that's the last question for today. I'd like to extend my extreme thanks to our panel members and speakers who've come along for today. You definitely deserve a round of applause.